You are listening to Second Chance Ministry Radio. The following presentation is entitled, He Has Risen. May the Lord bless and keep you today and forever. Amen.
2. Rachel. Because it was a holy day, I should not have gone to the marketplace. But the distance was within a Sabbath's walk, and I wanted to be sure I had secured my booth in case of windy weather. I was standing behind the counter, tying down an awning, when a litter passed my booth. A jeweled hand lifted the curtain, and a woman's voice commanded the attendants to halt. I straightened and smoothed my tunic. Few Gentiles ventured into this marketplace, but the few who did nearly always stopped to buy bread. "No braided loaves this morning?" The upraised curtain revealed the woman's face, her hair worn in the Roman style of tightly wound curls. "I was hoping you'd have that lovely bread. My husband is entertaining guests tonight." My apologies. I dipped my head in a slight bow. "But today is Passover. At sunset we celebrate the first day of our feast of unleavened bread. I cannot sell anything today, and tomorrow I will offer only unleavened matzot." "That's a shame." The woman's lower lip edged forward in a pout. "Surely you might make an exception and bake a braided loaf for me. My husband is an important man. He supplies silks to the prefect's wife." I shook my head. "I'm sorry." The woman chuffed and let the curtain fall. As her litter bearers continued onward, I couldn't help overhearing her complaints. "These Jews and their joy-killing God. I'll never understand why they can't be more accommodating. One has only to placate a god, and then one can do as one pleases." I blew out a breath as the litter moved away, and propped my elbows in the counter that usually held rows of freshly baked breads. I deserved the woman's criticism, but not for the reasons she mentioned. I was such a hypocrite. Why did I bother to keep the traditions of my people? Why did I obey the law when my heart had so thoroughly led me astray? Leah, another seller, stopped to say hello. "A blessed feast to you. How did you do yesterday? And where did you eat the Seder?" I forced a smile and deliberately ignored her last question. "I stayed busy yesterday. Sold every bit of my matzot." "I kept busy too. Between the selling and the baking and the temple." She shrugged, then waved a quick farewell and went on her way. I felt my smile fade. Yesterday had been particularly painful. Though I did keep busy with customers, I couldn't help feeling left out of the joyous hubbub of the preparation for Passover. Mothers had filled the marketplace, calling greetings to friends and neighbors as they bargained for spices and ingredients for their Seder meals. Merchants charged premium prices for the apples, figs, and nuts that would be mixed for the haraset to represent the mortar our forefathers used to make bricks in Egypt. Eggs sold briskly as well, for they had a special place on the traditional Seder plate, along with karpas, celery or parsley to represent the coming spring, maror, a bitter herb such as horseradish root, to represent the bitterness of slavery in Egypt, and of course the roasted lamb. After leaving the market, most families went directly to the temple, fathers leading their wives and children while carrying the sacrificial lamb on their shoulders. The lambs had been selected and set apart for sacrifice 4 days earlier, tied to a post outside each home, so that the animals might be carefully observed and tested. No family could offer a lamb that had either a blemish or spot. On preparation day, thousands of priests and Levites from all over Judea went to help with the bloody work of sacrifice. The crowds were so large that the temple gates had to be opened and closed 3 times so each family had an opportunity to offer its perfect lamb. The air trembled with the bleating of terrified animals as the priest offered them as both a sin offering and a peace offering. "The only annual sacrifice that serves a dual purpose," I could still hear my father saying. "That is why Passover is so special to us." After selling all my matzot, I went to the temple as well. Standing in the court of the women, alone among so many mothers with their children, I heard my heart break with a crisp snapping sound. I had hoped to find comfort by being with my people, but the presence of so many happy faces stung like salt on an open wound. As the scent of roasting lamb drifted through the streets of Jerusalem, I walked home and quietly closed the door behind me. Sinking to the bench at my small table, I pressed my palms to the bare wood and relived the preparation rituals of my childhood. While my father roasted the meat, my mother encouraged me to sweep the house, cleansing it from any chametz, crumbs of leavened bread, for leaven represented sin, which had no place in our lives. Mother scrubbed every dish and cooking utensil, while I carried every storage basket outside and thoroughly thumped it so the house would be entirely without leaven. Last night, every Hebrew family in Jerusalem had gathered around their crowded tables and shared the story of God's miraculous provision for our freedom from slavery in Egypt. Because every table had to have at least 10 guests, people invited neighbors, friends, even strangers to fill up the empty spaces and share the Paschal meal. No one invited me, because no one knew I was alone. As the entire Judean community ate and prayed together, I sat alone in my chametz-free house and lit the Shabbat candles for myself. My late husband's family no longer approved of me, and I had been too ashamed to let anyone else know I had no place to go. I would have been welcomed if I'd confessed I had nowhere to eat Passover, yet I didn't want to force my company on anyone. If the community discovered my secret shame, I would be completely cast out, perhaps even stoned. So why did I refuse to bake with leaven during the week-long feast of unleavened bread? Why did I still bow my head and recall God's deliverance during Passover? And why would I refrain from eating or tasting any bread at all until after the sheaf of new grain had been waved at the temple? Old habits, I told myself. Ingrained tradition. But habits and tradition did nothing to explain why I still yearned for the God of my father, the God with many names. El Roi, the God who sees, Yahweh Jireh, the God who provides, and Yahweh Shammah, the God who is always there. I shook myself out of my reverie as another litter passed my booth, this one carried by foreign slaves with shaved faces and thick wigs. Because this special Sabbath had fallen during the middle of the week and caught them unprepared, the Roman inhabitants of Jerusalem were probably desperate for bread and other services. But no matter. By sunset, Jerusalem would surely resume its ordinary rhythms. My husband had been in the grave 6 months when his parents, Benjamin and Leah, arrived at my home with their younger son Daniel. I welcomed them, served them lemon water and fig rolls, then sat to hear the reason for their unexpected visit. They wasted no time. "Rachel," Benjamin said, pressing his hands together as he leaned toward me, "we want you to come live with us. A woman should not live alone. People will talk." "It is not safe," Leah hastened to add, reaching for Daniel as if he might be exposed to danger simply by being in my house. "With the streets so filled with Romans, we will worry about you unless you are safely under our roof." I looked from one earnest face to the other. "I like living here. The marketplace is not far, and as you can see, I've made renovations to the oven for my baking." "It's not safe," Leah repeated. "You really should have gone back to your family after Aaron's death. We would have sent for you when the time was right." I blinked in confusion. "What time?" "Really, we had no idea you would want to stay in Jerusalem," Benjamin continued. "A woman belongs with her people." I drew a deep breath and tried to smile. I had no people. Not really. And my in-laws knew it. My parents died when I was 10, and my aunt and uncle raised me along with 6 children of their own. Because they put their children first in all things, I was 20 before they arranged a marriage for me. They would not welcome me if I were to return to their home in Hebron. "My aunt and uncle are older now," I said, trying to explain the situation without implying criticism of my relatives. They are busy with their children and grandchildren. You could sell the house, Leah suggested. The money would go a long way in paying for your keep until you are ready to marry again. A muscle in my eyelid began to twitch. I love my house. Since it was purchased with money from my dowry, it is fulfilling its purpose and sheltering me now that I have no husband.
Then you shall not move to Hebron.
Benjamin waved his hand, dismissing the topic. He laughed.
We are not trying to get rid of you. Like Ruth to Naomi, you are a daughter to us, and we are only concerned for your safety, your welfare.
And your reputation, Leah added. She squeezed Daniel's shoulder again. And that is why we have agreed. If you do not want to go home to your people, you must come live with us.
You are welcome to join us,
Benjamin said.
You will live with us, and next year, or when you are ready, you will marry Daniel.
Leah released Daniel, then leaned forward to grab my hand and place it in her son's. No! I pulled away, recoiling from Daniel's smiling face. He's an unbearded boy.
He's 17,
Benjamin said, his retort hardening his features.
He can father a child as well as any man in Jerusalem.
I snapped my mouth shut, stunned by his bluntness. You want me to have a son for Aaron? A levirate marriage?
Of course.
Benjamin tugged on his beard.
It is written in the law, if brothers live together, and one of them dies childless, his widow is not to marry someone unrelated to him. Her husband's brother is to go to her and perform the duty of a brother-in-law by marrying her. The first child she bears will succeed to the name of his dead brother, so his name will not be eliminated from Israel.
I could not speak for a moment. I absorbed the horrible revelation in silence, then shook my head. I know the law, but a levirate marriage will not work in our situation. I am too old for Daniel. He will not want to marry me. I would, Daniel said, still smiling. I would marry you today, but we would not be well suited. I injected a note of firmness into my voice. I had watched Daniel for the last 5 years, and knew he was intensely attached to his mother. Even if he were my age, I would not marry a man who still clung to his mother's skirts. Our Aaron has died without an heir, Leah said, her voice breaking. You can correct that mistake by marrying Daniel. I'm truly sorry. I looked from Leah to Benjamin. I'm sure Daniel will make someone a fine husband, and they may be blessed with dozens of children. But I have no wish to marry, nor do I want to leave my home. I'm perfectly content to live here. And if Hashem wills that I live here alone, so be it. How could Adonai be pleased with a young woman living alone and unmarried? Leah's sympathetic smile held a touch of sadness. A woman's purpose is to bring new life into the world. How can you be happy just baking bread? Her question snapped like a whip and made me flinch. I had no answer to give her. But of one thing I was certain. I would never be happy married to a boy.
Thank you for listening on Second Chance Ministry.